everybody, it's Bunny, and today I'm going to be doing like a crafty type tutorial informative video for you guys. So one of the most popular questions that I get in my PMs is how I dye clothing with like fabric dyes that you'd get at the craft store, and also how I tea dye clothing. I kind of searched in YouTube myself to see like what other videos on this subject matter were available, and they were all just like really weird, like people like taking strawberries and dyeing their clothing with strawberry. Like, why do I want to dye my clothes with fruit? Why would you ever want to do that? First of all, I'm going to show y'all the different dyes that you're going to find like at Joann's or Michael's or places like that. The first one and the best one, and everybody who watches my channel knows that my opinion is generally like everything that's oldest is the best one. And really, through trial and error, that's pretty much true with dye as well. The best dye that you're going to get on the market is RIT Liquid Dye. It's also the cheapest. Go figure. And you can pick this up anywhere. Walmart even has RIT Liquid Dye. This is going to give you the truest tone, richest, nicest color. You're going to get the best results with this dye. The second best dye that you're going to get is RIT Powdered Dye. You can also get this pretty cheap from Walmart. It might even be like a few cents cheaper than the liquid dye, but it's really worth the like 5-cent splurge to get the liquid, because this is harder to create an even mixture in the water, because you're gonna have to stir up all this powder that's in here instead of just pouring a quick and easy dye. Third best is Dylon dye. This is also a powder, and now they show you these really lovely colors you're gonna get. Like the purple one has an amethyst on it, and this has a flamingo on it, and they show you these like great National Geographic looking pictures. But let me tell you, I have dyed stuff with Dylon dye over and over and over again, polyesters, cottons, everything, and it never ever comes out this color. Like the purple amethyst one, which is probably the one I've used the most in this line, it never comes out a purple amethyst, okay? It comes out like a putrid navy color. I don't even know what's up with that. And then this, please don't waste your money on this dye. This is iPoly. And now this dye, they sell it like those really like artsy-fartsy like Picasso type stores. But this does not work, okay? It's supposed to be for polyesters. Like say you wanted to dye like a bustier or like those polyester, just, you know, like if you wanted to dye a bra or anything out of anything that's basically not cotton, you know. They tell you to use this dye, which comes also in a powdered form, but it's just terrible. It never comes out. Like literally, I bought like 8 packets of iPoly. Put all 8 packets in at once, okay? And I was trying to dye one little bitty 100% polyester dress, which is what this is for, and it came out like a nasty, dirty gray color. It was not black at all. No, it was terrible. So please don't buy this because it's like $4, and it's just grotesque. Now, by the way, that they say that this isn't for polyester, that this is supposed to be just for 100% cotton, the RIT dye, but I have had great results dyeing things polyester, and even if I like take a black thing of RIT dye and try and dye something polyester, like even if it doesn't come out 100% black, it still comes out like a very dark, pretty gray. I saw in one of the videos here on YouTube that they seriously showed that you should dye this in your bathtub. Please don't ever dye in your bathtub. That sounded funny. Don't ever dye in your bathtub. No, but don't ever take this dye and put it in your porcelain bathtub or any of these dyes, because it will freaking stain your bathtub, whatever color you pour in there, because porcelain, which most bathtubs are made out of, absorb things like dye, paint, blah, blah. So you don't want to do that. They say, like, you can put it on a stove, but I don't really recommend that either because you're going to eat out of these pots and pans. And, like, this is supposedly, like, is this non-toxic? No. They're like, don't eat this. Yeah, you don't want to eat this. If you don't have, like, a special boiler for that, like, don't do that because, like, who wants to eat fuchsia dye? I don't. And also, I really don't recommend that you're going to do it in a washing machine either, unless you're going to go to, like, a laundromat, which I know you're not supposed to do, but I've done it before, so whatever. Imagine, if you will, like Rod Serling, if you dump this dye in your washing machine and dye it in the wash, like, some of the dye is probably going to adhere in, like, the wash basin, so, like, next time, you know, somebody comes behind you and dumps their load of, like, white laundry, it's going to come out pink. That's not really gonna be cool. So the best way that I've had like the best results dyeing things is just to use like a plastic painter's bucket, and you can literally, like, I've seen them at the dollar store, I've seen them at Walmart, I've seen them everywhere. They're so cheap. So what I do is I take a boiler and I put it on the stove, like a big boiler, and I boil water. And you want to make it like boil till you see like the little bubbles come up, and I pour that into my plastic bucket. And now if you're just dyeing like one thing like this, like you really don't need that much water, like a gallon of water max, you know, because the less water that you use, the richer the color is going to permeate the fabric. So really I just use just enough water so that the fabric can like freely move around in it, you know, and so that whatever garment you're dyeing has water covering it. P.S. Don't use baking soda. I know tons of people say put a little bit of vinegar in there or put a little bit of baking soda in there. But seriously, I have taken things out of the dye bucket that I have dyed that have been black, like hell black, like the color I was going for. And then I put baking soda in it because that's supposed to make everything really cool. And then it turns navy in the wash. And I'm like, why? Why has this happened? So you don't want to do that. Don't add anything. Don't add anything that isn't dye or water. Don't add salt. So what you want to do is you want to boil the water, dump it in the bucket, and then you want to dump the dye in. And now you want to take like I always take a chopstick because they're free from the Asian food place. And I just dump the dye into the boiling water and stir it with a chopstick. And like, you know, once I've got it all mixed up, then you're going to put your garment in there. And that's the other reason why I use a chopstick is because I just like poke it down in there. Because you want to make sure that your entire garment is submerged in the water. That's why you want to make sure that there's enough water to cover the whole garment. And now they say, like, let it sit in there for 30 minutes or just run it with the wash. But I think that's total crap because you're going to get a richer color the longer you let it sit. So most of the time I just do this before I go to bed, and then I wake up in the morning and then take it out of the dye bucket. And, like, honestly, like, I've let things set up to, like, a week in there. Seriously. Because you can dye polyesters with this. The longer you let a polyester fabric and not 100% cotton fabric sit in the dye, the richer the color is going to be. And now also, if you want that kind of like marbled effect, you don't really have to tie dye or anything. If you want like a solid marbled effect, you can once again put the rubber bands on it. Or you can do this. You can boil the water, put the garment in, and then pour the dye on top. And that's going to, like, wherever the dye hits on the garment, it's going to be darker in that area. But once again, that's not going to give you like an even thing. So if you just want to turn like something purple and make it black, you want to do the first method that I described. Okay, so once you let it sit overnight, not for 30 minutes, my favorite way to rinse it out is to take it outside and I just lay whatever I've dyed like on my driveway, and I take like not a pressure washer but like meant for watering plants and stuff, and I hose it down really, really good until no colored dye is coming out with cold water, because the cold water is really going to set the dye. So once you rinse it with cold water outside, wring it out so none of the dye like goes back into your washing machine, you're going to want to put it in the wash with just a little bit of detergent, and you're going to want to run the cycle on cold. And for the first washing, I generally recommend to wash it on a delicate or hand wash cycle, because you don't want it like agitating all the dye out that you just dyed. And then when you throw it in the dryer, you can throw it on any scale you want. Okay, so now I'm going to do a quick little segment on tea dyeing, because I wore this little bustier corset type top a couple weeks ago in one of my videos, and I got, like I said, like lots of requests to do a tutorial on how to tea dye things. But it's really, really easy. So here is the deal. Whereas this, you can get away with doing cotton or polyester, you can only tea dye 100% cotton or muslin fabrics. Now for this process, you don't have to use a dye bucket. You can just use a boiler, because like tea is food, so it's not going to poison you. After I just like said, like, who wants to dye their clothes with food? I'm telling you how to dye clothes with food. So here's the rule for tea dyeing. It's pretty obvious. Like, the less tea bags you use and the smaller amount of time that you use to let it sit, you're going to get a lighter color. And the more tea bags you use and the longer you let it sit in the mixture, the darker it's going to get. And once again, the rule is like the larger boiler you use, the more tea bags you need, the smaller, the less, of course, because, you know, it's going to be a more concentrated mixture the smaller the container. So if you're doing something like this, you know, you can fold it up. Once again, the rule is you just basically want the whole garment to be submerged into the water. So you boil the water, and then you put the garment in, and then you just steep the tea bags. So I just kind of like steep them all around. And now to create these like spots that I've done, like where it's darker in this area, I actually take the tea bag with a spoon and I rest the tea bag on the garment and then press it down with a spoon. So like really concentrated amounts get in one tiny little area. And that's how you do that. It's really easy. But you know, like I said, if you want something to just barely be like a tan color, you probably only want to use about 4 to 5 tea bags and let it sit for 15 minutes. If you want something a really, really dark brown, you'd probably have to use closer to like 12 tea bags and let it sit for probably about 2 hours. Now, there's really no science to tea dyeing. Like, you just basically have to play with it. So, I mean, I wouldn't like take like Armani and have that your first go at tea dyeing. Like, I would literally probably just take an old crappy t-shirt that you don't care about anymore and just like experiment, see what you get really with either of these things, and then like start with the major stuff, because like I always say as a disclaimer, like you don't want us to like take your like prized possession, dump it in a bucket of tea. The other thing that I would leave y'all with is if you're dyeing something and you want it to come out really, really dark, most of the time I have a 1 bottle is never enough rule. So even though on the bottle it says that you can use 1 bottle for 2 pounds of fabric, that's not going to give you your richest, darkest color. So if you want something to be really, really black, like I would pour about 2 or 3 bottles in there, even if it's a smaller garment, just because that's going to make it a really, really beautiful, rich black. So I hope this video was helpful, and as usual, please take a moment to subscribe, comment down below, especially if you have any questions, and you can also follow me on Twitter if you want. My name is Pretty Vacant, and I will put it right down here. And I will see you guys later. Bye.